Today we're going to show how all indigenous people and all modern people are colonizers that displaced others. And I'm going to discuss the chain of events that would need to occur to make giving land back to who had it first logical and fair. Now what you see on your screen are anthropologists and scientists' representations of what the Neanderthals or Neanderthals, whatever way you want to pronounce it, and the Denisovan people look like. And these people are, it's written in some of the definitions that they are a species or subspecies of humans. Now if you want to consider them a subspecies of humans, that don't count. Just because they have wide noses, big lips, and pronounced brows, when we still have a lot of modern day human people that have wide noses, big lips, and pronounced brows in all races. Some races more so than others. So it's silly to think that those people are a subspecies of humans just because they might behave differently or look differently. And a lot of people ask me, Adam, what motivates you to make videos like this? And it's because I do a lot of research, and I noticed that after doing a lot of research that modern day humans have silly ideas that are self-destructive and dumb. So I have some research terms that I want you to check out. You can check them out with me, or you can do it on your own more in depth. I'm going to do it with you right now. And the first research term is indigenous people want their land back. And you'll find that there's all over the world people that we refer to as indigenous are screaming and yelling for their lands back just because some ancient ancestor that looked like them a little bit might have resided there at one point. But humans don't sprout from the earth like plants and mushrooms. We're born from the female. And what I believe is there had to be one ancestral pair or one set of ancestral pairs for each division of species. And they had to start somewhere, and we'll never figure out where exactly they started or what lands that they migrated to and had to displace other things that were living there. So in actuality, all the people that we consider to be indigenous are actually colonizers themselves that displaced other humans and a lot of the animal kingdom and fauna. Now, as you're researching indigenous people want their land back, you'll see that there's a lot just of people complaining and screaming about getting their land back. But then there's one where people also ask, it says, do natives want their land back? And it says, but much of Native American lands ended up in private hands, and tribes are increasingly buying back that land. That's the way to go about it. Buy back the land that your ancient ancestors sold off and sold away and sold out. And that's why it's not in their possession anymore. For instance, China, they're going around buying up a whole lot of the earth, a lot of farmlands, and large, massive areas of land in both Africa, United States, and many other places. Now, are they evil colonizers for doing that? They're buying it fair and square, and the people who are living there now are selling it out. And what's going to happen is their descendants, 100 years from now, are going to be screaming and crying about, oh, evil Chinese colonists. No, they're not evil Chinese colonists. They're buying it fair and square. And even if they weren't buying it fair and square, if you can't protect it, somebody stronger, if you can't protect it to keep it, somebody stronger is going to come along and take it from you. If you don't have good security or military, if you can't fight what's coming. And I'm going to show a good example of that in modern day near the end of this video. The next term that we're going to research is, and you don't have to research on the internet, you can actually go to a library or talk to actual historians and they'll let you know. You can actually go into books. You don't have to use the internet because the internet is comprised of what comes out of libraries usually, especially in the scientific and anthropology departments. So the next term is Africans want their land back, and you'll see a whole lot of material about Africans screaming and yelling about wanting their land back and how they're actually stealing it back forcefully from people who paid for it when they don't really deserve it. Now the next term is an interesting one. Zimbabwe begged European farmers to come back. So I'll just give you the short of this story. In Zimbabwe, there were European farmers that were basically farming there and feeding everyone, and then the Africans with I think it was Mugabe, he ran they killed a bunch of the Europeans, they also ran them off, and they just stole their farmlands. Then they started starving and self-destructing, they begged the white European farmers to come back. And some of the white European farming families were nice enough to come back to start feeding those Africans again. And this might offend some of you, but it's an actual event that happened, where Zimbabwe kicked out all the European white farmers, and then they started starving to death, and they couldn't maintain their numbers anymore. Without the European white farmers, they would have went back to nomadic tribes. And I guess they didn't want that, so they begged the European white farmers to come back. Now the next research term we're going to look at is, what ethnicity have Neanderthal DNA? It says, and you can check out all the results on your own time if you want, but it says East Asians seem to have the most Neanderthal DNA in their genomes, followed by those of European ancestry. Africans, long thought to have no Neanderthal DNA, were recently found to have genes from the hominins comprising around 0.3% of their genome. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we all have Neanderthal DNA, and a lot of us have Denisovan DNA, which means that those species of humans still linger in us, which means that who do we give the land back to? All of us? If we're going to be logical and fair, everybody is a descendant of people who were displaced and killed off long ago. But they weren't killed off completely because there was interbreeding going on, and they still linger in us. So to say that a certain group of people should own a part of the earth forever and ever because some ancient ancestor walked upon it at some time or resided there at some time is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And these ideas come from the liberal establishment, the left. Now the next term I want you to check out is Neanderthal definition. An extinct species of human that was widely distributed in Ice Age Europe between 120,000 to 35,000 years ago. And also it says Neanderthal is also written as Neanderthals are an extinct species or subspecies. And it's funny how they add that or subspecies, because just because they got wide noses, big lips, and pronounced brows and foreheads doesn't mean that they're a subspecies. And it says before subspecies, it says an extinct species of archaic human. So they are a human. They're just ancient and archaic. But they all still linger in us. We are part of them. And the same with Denisovan definition. The Denisovans of Denisova hominins are an extinct species or subspecies, which the Denisovans are a darker color than the Neanderthals, according to anthropologists. And just because they're a dark, wide-nosed, big-lipped, pronounced brow species of human does not make them a subspecies. And it's silly to think that. And nobody knows how these people lived, what their cultures were. All we have is just rare and sparse artifacts left to determine how they lived. But I would imagine they were a lot like us. They just didn't have the technologies we have. We like to think that we're advanced because we have all of these technologies, but in reality, we have not evolved very much. And look how silly we are in the world today. Now, I want to discuss the chain of giving back. To be logical and fair, if we're going to give back all the lands to so-called indigenous people, then why are we stopping there? The indigenous people would then have to give it back to who they took it from, which would be the ape kingdom. And then the ape kingdom would have to give the land back to the fauna and mushrooms and trees. And then the fauna, mushrooms, and trees would have to give all the land back to the microbes. And then the microbes would all have to give all of the land back to the ocean-dwelling creatures. And then as reparations, we can all just jump in the ocean and suicide ourselves. That way they can have a nice snack as reparations. You see how dumb these ideas are? These people are silly human beings on the left and the liberals. And you don't see these ideas coming out of conservatism or people on the right. And yeah, I'm making a distinction there. I'm categorizing. So what? It's easy to see where these dumb ideas come from of giving land back to people whose ancient ancestors sold it off or either lost it in wars and things like that. That's not how humans work. Humans don't just give things back. These Neanderthals and Denisovans, they didn't just give things back to what creatures and wildlife they had to take those areas from. None of it makes any sense, and that's why I think they're very foolish, dangerous people who run with these ideas. Now, I just have two more things to discuss. I want to discuss research the Sentinelese people, the Sentinelese tribe. Okay? Now, what the Sentinelese tribe is I think it's a 30,000-year-old culture that is untouched, somewhat untouched. I mean, they have made contact with others, but the way they preserve themselves on this island they live on is when people try to come to them to spread a religion or give them things or trade with them, they'll usually just shoot poison-tipped arrows and throw poison-tipped spears at them, killing them immediately before they even get the chance to come up on shore and talk. But you'll also see times where they will take gifts and trade with people on boats. But a lot of the times, right when that person or people row away, they're shooting arrows into their backs. So, and these people are wild, man. And there's no disrespect. I have a lot of respect for the Sentinelese people because they understand how to preserve their culture and their way of life. And the Indian government also protects them. They have certain laws where you can't go within 5 miles of their island. But people do risk it. And so, without the Indian government protecting them, they would have been wiped out a while ago, I think. But it's good that the Indian government protects them. That's really honorable of the Indian government. And I'm not talking about Indians. I'm talking about the Dot Indians. They're the ones protecting the Sentinelese people who are a dark skin. They look African. And the Indians, the Hindu type Indians, are the ones protecting their 30,000-year-old culture. Without them, they would be wiped out and everything stolen from them. But my point is that if the Native Americans, or the so-called Native Americans who are actually Siberians here in North America, if they would have just not been so friendly to outsiders from the beginning, they would have kept this land for a much longer period of time. And I know it sounds harsh, and it sounds like it's not very loving, but that's the reality of the human condition. When you're nice and welcoming and saying, oh, bring all this diversity and new culture in, your culture is going to be eventually wiped out. And then people in the future will complain about it when they have nothing to complain about because it's the own fault of their own ancestors. Now, there's one last little research term that I want you to check out. It's, do scientists lie? And you can find tons of information about where and how and when scientists lie about certain things. And there's a lot of reasons why science lies. And I love science because it helps us understand things. But we also have to keep in mind that scientists and science itself as a whole will lie and just make things up. And they'll also write equations. For instance, mathematicians, physicists will write equations that are complete nonsense and lies just to corroborate some notion that they have or some lie that they want to perpetuate. So you can't trust science fully. You can't believe everything science says because science has been caught lying too many times. But I think, in general, as a whole, science is very beneficial for us. But you also have to watch out for lies in science. For instance, the Big Bang Theory, it stopped from being called theory, and now it's just the Big Bang. When you watch documentaries about space, they'll just say the Big Bang happened. They don't know if the Big Bang actually happened or not. It's a theory, it's an hypothesis, and it should be presented that way in all documentaries, that we don't actually know and can't prove it yet. But yet, science slowly is trying to make it to where it's not even a theory or hypothesis anymore. They're just saying the Big Bang happened. So that's you gotta watch out for science in those in that regard. Okay, so I hope this video has been educational and informing, and I hope too many of you don't get your feathers ruffled or feelings hurt about the truth. Alright, talk to you later. Bye bye.